All right, next we're going to hear a little bit about the film. Philippe Nicolet is a Swiss film director of both documentary and fiction films, a former journalist, and scriptwriter. He was the first editor-in-chief of the Lausanne television station before embarking on a project tracing the history of relations between Switzerland and the European Union for the Jean Monnet Foundation. In addition to documentary footage filmed in some 50 countries, he became known for his hundreds of interviews of political, scientific, and artistic personages. In 2006, Nicolet began creating 3D films.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure, really indeed, to be with you today. Until this morning, I didn't know I was supposed to say a few words, therefore you won't see me with any paper. All I have to say is that I'm very, very happy is also to meet people and to see people here that I'm very fond of. And I think I see my sister-in-law who lives in New Jersey, and that's a great, great thing for me. And also, if I mention my dear sister-in-law, who is a music editor, and her husband, who is a composer, so happy to see them. It's because, thanks to them, actually, I happen to be married to an American lady. That's my personal story, which means my link to this country. Happy I am, of course, very much, because the story happened to me, as far as this project is concerned, in 2008. At that time, I was supposed to give a lesson, I guess, a speech in the Audiorama, the National Audiovisual Museum in Switzerland. It was 2008, and I was going to talk about Edison's invention and the idea of the phonograph and the first films, and then I heard about Au clair de la lune. So no one had heard about it when I was so proud to announce that. It was a scoop, imagine that. And for me, it's been something that has fascinated me ever since. My team and I are actually doing a lot of documentaries about history and archaeology. If you go to the National Museum of Athens, you will see one of our films in 3D. 3D is really the mean that we use in our films because we like to capture the 3D dimension. Actually, the film we're making here is in 3D. Unfortunately, you'll see part of it in 2D, because, of course, it's always easy to use a 2D thing. But we do shoot most of this documentary in 3D. So actually, we were doing this until I heard last year, or at the end of 2014, that the UNESCO was going to recognize this incredible discovery by David Giovannoni and Patrick Pfister and inscribe it in the Register of the World Register of the UNESCO. So I thought, oh, I have to find David Giovannoni's address. I checked what the BBC had done and everything, and I find his address. I write him a mail, very impatient, and almost immediately, I think 24 hours later, I received a mail. I was so nervous. So the mail says, "Dear Philippe, thank you very much for your interest. First of all, I'm sorry to tell you," oh, there was the end, "that quite a few film directors have approached me and nothing went further." But I did read my mail further, and he said, "But I went to see on the web your films, and I like them. And whoever is in touch with Robert Plant, the singer of Led Zeppelin," he saw a thing that I did with Led Zeppelin, "deserves my attention. And rock and roll saved the film, believe it or not. If we're here, it's because of Led Zeppelin." More or less. So then, it's such a great thing for me to receive from Mr. Giovannoni this, he was a hero for me. And of course, this answer was incredible. So what I did, of course, we started to Skype together. Then I got a chance to see Laurent. Then I thought, why don't you guys come to Switzerland? It's easy for me to put my big cameras, because most of the time we have larger cameras. We have red cameras, 3D, it's a huge type of thing. So we thought we cannot bring them so easily. Why don't you come? So they all did. So we did long interviews in Switzerland, and then the next move was to be received by the Académie des Sciences, which was, of course, was really for us, a treat. We were able to film this phonogram, and fortunately, before UNESCO recognized this, because nowadays, I tell you, it's almost impossible to see them. We are almost the fortunate one who are able to film them without a glass. Now, it would be hard nowadays, because, of course, meanwhile, Scott became so famous that it's almost impossible to film him. So here we are today, and if I'm so happy, it's for another reason that I should have mentioned first. We're at a place that fascinates me very much, which is this Edison's Park. And may I just tell you that one of the reasons why I'm so happy is that I consider Edison was a man of future, with a vision of future. And here, in this room, there is a man whom I got to know about by reading his articles, Mr. Sloan Edison. I read about a year ago what he wrote about sustainable energy, what about the problem environment, about the need to recognize new energy, sustainable energy. And I thought, here's a man of future like his great-grandfather was. So my admiration for you, Mr. Sloan Edison, was so big that imagine today, now that so many important questions are today questioned and sometimes considered invalid, it's so good to have you, Mr. Sloan Edison, who sees the future, and I wish so many more people like you would see the future. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
I no longer possess anything. I beg all good people not to forget to mention my name in this affair.
The man who wrote these words died shortly after and was buried in an unmarked grave. But he left the world much more than his name. He left his own voice, the first ever recorded. But this voice was impossible to hear. Until recently, it was thought that the first sound recordings had been made by Edison on his phonograph in 1877.
Mary had a little lamb, white as snow.
But two American researchers, David Giovannoni and Patrick Pfister, discovered forgotten items in the French National Archives. Bits of paper blackened with charcoal, on which sound waves had been traced back in the mid-19th century.
Can we hope that the day is near when phrases coming out of our lips will write themselves automatically? I believe so. I am inventing the photography of sound.
We knew that this Frenchman, Edouard-Léon Scott de Martinville, had recorded sound in the 1850s. He had deposited brevets at the patent office. He worked on his machine with help from scientists such as Jules Lissajous at the Society for the Advancement of National Industry in Paris. So he worked on it with other people. He collaborated. But he writes of making many, hundreds of experiments.
Assez complexe et pas du tout évident. Il montre qu'il s'efforce d'analyser les transcriptions et donc qu'il essaye de trouver les significations des différentes ondes qu'il a pu enregistrer grâce à son appareil.
In fact, Scott had invented the first sound recording device a generation earlier than Edison. He took out a patent and appended his recordings on blackened paper as proof that his machine worked.
I could tell enough that these were almost certainly recordings that could be played back.
David Giovannoni studied the pieces of paper and tried to digitize the irregular sound waves.
And we have here the...
He yelled into this machine, "Hello, hello."
Exactly.
Yeah.
It turned out that Scott had provided the key himself while perfecting his machine. He recorded the sound of a tuning fork at the same time as his voice, and thus invented the time code.
So here we have a trace straight from the original scan. One is the trace of the tuning fork on the top, and the other is a trace made by the voice on the bottom.
So we had to go through a number of separate processes over the course of maybe 5, 7, 10 days to turn this into what we now hear and can easily interpret as somebody singing Au clair de la lune.
In a miracle of modern archaeology, the blackened paper came to life. The voice they heard was Scott's own, recorded one day in April 1860.
It's something between my two uncles' voice. It's so amazing to think it's my great-grandfather he is speaking. My God.
Je l'avais jamais rêvé et c'est vrai que lorsqu'on a restitué ces sons et qu'on a pu entendre sa voix en direct, ça a été quand même une émotion considérable.
I think we all understood that what we had just managed to accomplish would change the scope of our audible past. We'd be able to listen back now further into the past than anyone had been able to do before.
Leon Scott's brilliant invention, he recorded sound out of the air. You know, if we could encapsulate Leon Scott's invention in a single sentence, it would be, the phonautograph recorded sound out of the air onto a permanent medium over time.
International recognition came recently when UNESCO inscribed Scott's recordings on the Memory of the World Register. And now Scott's invention takes its rightful place alongside Edison's. The history of sound recording is being rewritten.